In the cradle of ancient Hellas, where mountains claw at the heavens and the wine-dark sea weaves dreams of power, two cities rose like twin stars, blazing with glory yet fated to collide. Athens, the eagle of wisdom, perched on her rocky hill, her wings spread wide to embrace the world's ideas. Sparta, the lion of iron, crouched in her verdant valley, her claws honed by conquest and discipline. Together, they defied the shadow of Persia, the mightiest empire ever known. But when their fragile alliance crumbled, they plunged into a 27-year war, a crucible of fire and blood that forged history's course and left a warning carved in stone. Even the greatest can fall when pride outstrips purpose. This is the saga of Athens and Sparta, a tale of triumph, betrayal, and ruin that speaks to us still, whispering truths about power, ambition, and the human heart. Picture Athens, her limestone acropolis glowing under a dawn sky, the air alive with the chatter of merchants and the musings of philosophers. Here, in Attica's embrace, villages gathered around a fortress hill, their hearths warmed by tales of divine contest. Athena, gray-eyed goddess of wisdom, gifted her people the olive tree, its silver leaves a promise of peace, prosperity, and thought. Poseidon, sea lord, offered a saltwater spring, a lure of trade and adventure, but also of tempests. Cecrops, the serpent king, chose Athena's gift, planting the seed of a city that would prize words over swords, debate over dominion. In the agora, where potters shaped clay and traders swapped stories of distant lands, questions bloomed like wildflowers. What is justice? Who should govern? How do we build a life worth living? Now journey south, to Laconia's green valley, where the Eurotas River winds like a silver thread beneath the Taygetus Mountains' stern gaze. Sparta, the sown land, was born of conquest, her people Dorians, who claimed the Peloponnese with bronze and fire. Their children grew on tales of Heracles, their kings his heirs, and Apollo, whose oracles shaped their fate. But beneath these stories lurked a shadow, the Helots, a conquered people bound to the fields, their numbers vast, their resentment a smoldering ember. Sparta's survival depended on vigilance, her society forged into a blade to hold this restless land. See a Spartan boy, barely 7, torn from his mother's arms, her face a mask of pride hiding grief. He joins others marching to barracks, where the agoj, a forge of flesh and will shape him into a warrior. Hunger, cold, and pain are his teachers, obedience his creed. Boys sleep on river reeds, steal to eat, and face the Cryptia, a secret rite where the boldest hunt helots under moonless skies, rooting out rebellion's spark. This is no cruelty for sport. It's necessity, a pact with survival in a world where weakness invites ruin. Spartan women, too, defy the Greek mold. They run, wrestle, hurl javelins, their bodies oiled and strong, trained to birth warriors as fierce as their fathers. They own land, nearly half the valley's wealth, a power unseen elsewhere, ensuring the state's endurance. In their mess halls, warriors share black broth, their laughter brief but fierce, bound by a brotherhood forged in blood. Only those who die in battle or childbirth earn marked graves, their names etched as offerings to the collective. 2 cities, 2 visions. Athens, a beacon of ideas, her sails catching the winds of trade and thought. Sparta, a fortress of discipline, her shields locked against chaos. Their paths diverged, yet fate wove them together, first as allies against a titan, then as foes in a war that would consume them both. The storm came from the east, where Persia's empire stretched like a vast tapestry, its threads woven with gold and conquest. In 499 BCE, Athens backed the Ionian revolt, torching Sardis and igniting Darius's wrath. "Remember the Athenians," he swore, his voice a vow of vengeance. At Marathon, 490 BCE, 25,000 Persians landed, their armor a glittering tide. Miltiades, a general who knew their ways, led 11,000 hoplites, citizens, not soldiers, across the plain in a desperate charge. Spears flashed, dust rose, and Persian lines broke, thousands falling as the Greeks lost mere hundreds. Pheidippides ran 26 miles to cry, "Victory!" before death claimed him, his breath spent for Athens' glory. 10 years later, Xerxes, Darius' heir, unleashed an army vast as a sea, 200,000 men, their ships bridging the Hellespont in defiance of nature. At Thermopylae, Leonidas and his 300 Spartans, with 7,000 allies, held a narrow pass. For 3 days, their phalanx turned Persian arrows to chaff, their spears reaping lives like wheat. Betrayal, a traitor's path through the mountains, doomed them. Leonidas sent allies away, standing with his 300 and a few Thespians, their shields a wall until the last fell. Their epitaph, "Here, obedient to Sparta's laws, we lie." Their sacrifice bought time, a spark of defiance. At Salamis, Themistocles turned the tide. In a strait too tight for Persia's vast fleet, Greek triremes, nimble, bronze-rammed, struck like wolves among sheep. Xerxes watched from a golden throne as 200 ships sank, his dreams drowning. The next year at Plataea, Spartan and Athenian spears crushed Persia's last army, freeing Greece. But victory sowed discord. The Delian League, born on Apollo's sacred isle, united 200 cities under Athens' lead. Aristides set fair tributes, and Simon's victories filled Delos' treasury with Persian gold. Yet Athens' ambition grew, her allies becoming subjects. Pericles' Athens gleamed, the Parthenon rising from tribute, a marble hymn to democracy's might. But Naxos' crushed rebellion and the treasury's move to Athens revealed an empire, not a league. Pericles declared, "Our navy is our strength. Those who share its shield must pay its price." Sparta, leading her own Peloponnesian League, watched with unease. Her allies, like Corinth, chafed under Athens' trade bans, like the embargo on Megara. Tensions simmered, old bonds fraying. War ignited in 431 BCE, not with trumpets, but a Theban sneak attack on Plataea, Athens' ally. Plataeans fought with knives in desperation, breaking oaths and spilling blood. Sparta's 60,000 hoplites marched, burning Attica's fields. Pericles held firm. "Hide behind the long walls, let the navy strike." But refugees crowded Athens, their homes ashes, their voices rising in anger. Then, in 430 BCE, plague struck, a silent killer from a merchant ship. Streets became graves, temples morgues, as a third of Athens died. Thucydides wrote of a city unmoored, honor crumbling. Pericles fell, his steady hand lost to chaos. Cleon, fiery and bold, rose in his place, urging war over patience. At Pylos, 425 BCE, Demosthenes trapped 120 Spartans on Sphacteria. Fire and arrows forced their surrender, a shock to Greece, shattering Sparta's myth of invincibility. Athens, drunk on triumph, spurned peace, Alcibiades dreaming of empire. In 415 BCE, he pushed for Sicily, a land of grain and gold. 200 triremes sailed, the city's youth aboard, cheered by crowds blind to danger. Nicias, reluctant commander, warned of folly, but ambition won. Syracuse, aided by Sparta and Corinth, defied Athens. The siege faltered, months becoming years. Nicias wrote, "We are besieged, not besiegers." Athens sent more ships, more men, but Syracuse's harbor became their grave. Triremes burned, 40,000 perished or were enslaved. Nicias and Demosthenes executed. Athens staggered, her empire cracking as allies rebelled. Lysander, Sparta's cunning admiral, saw opportunity. At Aegospotami, 405 BCE, he ambushed Athens' last fleet. 180 triremes captured as crews foraged. Starvation gripped Athens, her harbors blockaded. In 404 BCE, she surrendered, her walls razed, the 30 tyrants ruling with Spartan spears. Critia's terror killed thousands, but Thrasybulus's rebellion from Phyle restored democracy in 403 BCE, a flicker of hope. Sparta's victory was hollow. Her oligarchies bred resentment, her reputation as liberator tarnished. Thebes rose, Epaminondas' sacred band crushing Spartan hoplites at Leuctra, 371 BCE, killing King Cleombrotus. Messenia's liberation gutted Sparta's wealth, her warriors dwindling. By 362 BCE, at Mantinea, Epaminondas fell, Thebes' dream dying with him. Athens and Sparta, allied against Thebes, were shadows, their power spent. As Macedon rose under Philip II, uniting Greece by 338 BCE, Athens' legacy lived in Plato's Academy, Sophocles' tragedies, Aristotle's logic. Sparta's discipline inspired warriors, but her valley grew quiet, her glory a memory. Their ruins stand under crimson skies, whispering of hubris and resilience. Athens' ambition, Sparta's rigidity, both fell to their own strengths. Today, their story asks, can we bridge our divides, or will we too crumble under pride's weight? Which would you choose? Athens' freedom or Sparta's strength? Share your thoughts below and let their saga live on. As the crimson sun sank over Mantinea, the blood of Epaminondas mingled with the dust, and with it, Thebes' fleeting dream of dominion. Athens and Sparta, once titans locked in a struggle that shook the earth, stood now as weary allies, their spears lowered, their glory dimmed. The Greek world, fractured by decades of war, lay open like a wound, vulnerable to a new power rising in the north. Macedon, under Philip II, forged a blade sharper than any Spartan phalanx, a vision broader than any Athenian debate. Yet the echoes of Athens' freedom and Sparta's strength would ripple through time, their ruins whispering lessons to a world still wrestling with the same questions. Can ambition be tempered by wisdom? Can unity outlast pride? This is the story of their twilight, the rise of a new order, and the timeless truths they left behind. In Pella's stone palace, lit by torches that cast flickering shadows, Philip trained his son Alexander, a boy with fire in his veins. Aristotle, summoned from Athens' Academy, taught the young prince logic, poetry, and the secrets of the stars. A king must know both war and wisdom, the philosopher said, his words sinking deep into the boy who would one day carry Greece to the ends of the earth. Macedonian phalangites, armed with 18-foot sarissas, drilled in courtyards, their spear tips gleaming like a forest of steel. Philip's genius lay not in numbers, but in innovation. Cavalry that struck like thunder, infantry that moved as one, and diplomacy that turned rivals into allies before swords were drawn. While Athens debated and Sparta drilled, a new power loomed across the Aegean: Persia. From the plains of Iran, Cyrus and Darius had forged an empire spanning 3 continents. Their roads carried armies as easily as caravans. Their satraps ruled from Egypt to India. In 499 BCE, Greek cities of Asia Minor rose in revolt against Persian rule. And Athens, bold and idealistic, sent ships to aid them. Together, they burned the satrapal capital of Sardis. In retaliation, Darius swore vengeance on the Athenians. When the Persian fleet landed at Marathon in 490 BCE, Athens faced annihilation. Against overwhelming odds, her citizen soldiers, farmers and potters, charged the invaders head-on. Their discipline and armor shattered the Persian line. The enemy fled to their ships. The victory electrified Greece. For the first time, free citizens had defeated an empire. Yet triumph bred arrogance, and Persia was far from finished. 10 years later, Darius's son Xerxes returned with a host so vast it seemed endless. Northern Greece burned, cities submitted or fled. Only a small coalition stood firm: Athens, Sparta, and a handful of others. At Thermopylae, King Leonidas and his 300 Spartans, joined by allies, held the narrow pass for 3 days against the tide. When betrayal revealed a hidden path, they fought to the last. Their sacrifice bought time for Greece to rally. At Salamis, Themistocles of Athens lured the Persian fleet into narrow waters, where Greek triremes rammed and sank them one by one. Xerxes watched from his throne as his navy burned. The following year, Sparta led the final victory at Plataea. The Persians retreated. Greece was free. But freedom carried its own temptations. In the aftermath, Athens rebuilt her walls and her confidence. The Delian League was born, a coalition of Greek cities to defend against future invasions. Athens provided ships and leadership. Allies contributed money or men. The treasury sat on the sacred island of Delos, under Apollo's eye. Yet as decades passed, the alliance became an empire in disguise. Tribute filled Athenian coffers, and the city gleamed with marble. Pericles, its greatest statesman, oversaw the building of the Parthenon, a temple so perfect that even ruins could not diminish it. The Parthenon's friezes told stories of gods and mortals, but it was also a declaration of power. Gold from the League paid its cost. The allies grumbled. Athens called their dissent rebellion. Naxos was besieged. Thasos humbled. The treasury moved from Delos to the Acropolis, ostensibly for safety, in truth for control. Athens had become what she once opposed, a hegemon ruling others in the name of freedom. Sparta viewed this glittering empire with suspicion. To the Lacedaemonians, wealth was corruption, words mere ornament. They saw in Athens a city drunk on its own brilliance. The Peloponnesian League, Sparta's network of allies, was built on mutual defense rather than tribute, but it lacked cohesion. When Athens imposed trade bans on Megara, Sparta's ally, and interfered in conflicts involving Corinth, tension flared. Each side claimed justice. Each saw the other as aggressor. It was not greed alone that drove them toward war, but incompatible visions of order. Athens championed individual freedom and debate. Sparta valued duty and unity. They were opposites, reflections of two halves of the human spirit. And so the stage was set for a conflict that would last 27 years and consume them both. The embers of distrust had smoldered too long, and in the spring of 431 BCE, they burst into flame. Thebes, Sparta's ally, struck first, her hoplites stealing through the night to seize Plataea. That small city astride the mountain passes linking Attica to Boeotia, They dreamed of a swift coup, a bloodless gift to the Peloponnesian League, but Plataea's citizens, fierce in their loyalty to Athens, met them with kitchen knives and plowshares, their fury turning streets into slaughterhouses. By dusk, Theban corpses littered the agora, their broken oaths staining the earth as surely as their blood. The massacre sent a shiver through Hellas. King Archidamus, sacrificing to Apollo on Sparta's frontier, heard the news and knew the time for words had passed. War, that ancient arbiter, would now decide the fate of Greece. Archidamus led 60,000 hoplites across the Attic border, their bronze armor blazing like a river of fire under the summer sun. Lambda shields gleamed, red cloaks billowed, and the helots who trailed them bore the weight of spears and supplies, their eyes flickering with unspoken dreams of freedom. They ravaged Attica's fields, uprooted olive groves sacred to Athena, and burned farmsteads until the horizon glowed crimson. Athens watched from behind her long walls, those stone sinews stretching from the Acropolis to the sea. Pericles, his face carved from resolve, stood atop the ramparts, urging patience. "Let them waste their fury on our fields," he declared to the ecclesia, his voice steady as marble. "Our ships will feed us, our empire sustain us. Time is our ally, not theirs. But within the city, refugees choked the streets, their livestock penned in temple courtyards, their anger simmering like a pot left too long over the fire. Young men clamored to march out, their cries rising above the smoke. Are we cowards to hide while barbarians torch our homes? The first year ended without decision, Sparta's army withdrawing as autumn winds cooled the ashes of Attica. But the second year brought a foe no walls could repel. Plague, born in distant Egypt, crept into Athens on a merchant ship, its invisible arrows piercing rich and poor alike. Streets became charnel houses, bodies piled faster than pyres could burn. Priests abandoned altars, doctors fled in terror, and the living, stripped of hope, chased fleeting pleasures before death claimed them. Thucydides, who survived the pestilence, wrote of a city unmade where law and piety dissolved like mist before the sun. Pericles, the architect of Athens' defiance, fell to the disease in 429, his death a wound deeper than any Spartan spear. The ecclesia mourned, but new voices rose. Cleon, the tanner-turned orator, whose fiery words promised victory where Pericles had preached endurance. Cleon's ambition found its test in Mytilene, a lesbian city that dared to rebel against the empire in 428. The ecclesia, drunk on rage, voted to slaughter its men and enslave its women, a punishment to chill other would-be rebels. But Diodotus, calm as a philosopher amid the storm, argued for mercy. Kill them, and you make enemies of the desperate. Spare them, and you bind their loyalty with gratitude. A second trireme, oars cutting the wine-dark sea, raced to countermand the death sentence, arriving as the sun rose over Mytilene's walls. The city was spared, though its leaders' heads rolled, a warning etched in blood. Yet Athens' leniency masked a growing ruthlessness, her democracy hardening under the weight of war. The conflict settled into a grim rhythm. Each summer, Spartan hoplites marched north, burning what little remained of Attica's countryside. Each summer, Athenian triremes struck Peloponnesian coasts, their bronze rams splintering enemy harbors. Neither could land a killing blow. Sparta's phalanxes were invincible on land, but Athens' navy ruled the waves. In 425, a bold stroke at Pylos shifted the balance. Demosthenes, an Athenian general with a gambler's nerve, fortified a rocky promontory on Messenia's coast, trapping a Spartan detachment on the island of Sphacteria. Cleon, boasting he would end the siege in 20 days, sailed to oversee the assault. Fire and arrows drove the Spartans from their defenses, and when the dust settled, 120 Lacedaemonian hoplites, sons of Lycurgus, laid down their shields, choosing slavery over death. The Greek world gasped. Sparta's myth of invincibility cracked like bronze under a hammer. Emboldened, Athens rejected Spartan peace offers, her citizens dreaming of total victory. But hubris, that old Greek sin, whispered of greater conquests. In 415, Alcibiades, beautiful and reckless, stood before the ecclesia, his words weaving visions of a Western empire. "Sicily awaits us," he proclaimed, his eyes alight with ambition. "Her cities quarrel, her grain fields overflow. One strike, and the Mediterranean is ours." Nicias, scarred by years of war, warned of overreach. "We bleed here, yet you seek new enemies across the sea?" But the assembly, swayed by youth and glory, voted for the expedition. 200 triremes, their owl-etched prows gleaming, sailed from Piraeus, carrying the flower of Athens' youth to a distant shore. Sicily proved a graveyard. Syracuse, stiffened by Corinthian ships and Spartan advisors, defied Athenian siege works. Months stretched into years, the invaders trapped in a hostile land. Nicias, commanding a campaign he had opposed, wrote desperate pleas. "We are no longer besiegers, but besieged." Athens, blind to defeat, sent more ships, more men, more gold. In 413, the end came swiftly. Syracusan triremes cornered the Athenian fleet in the great harbor. Bronze rams tearing through oaken hulls. Ships burned, men drowned, and the retreat inland became a death march. 40,000 began the trek. Fewer than 4,000 survived, their bones bleaching under Sicilian suns. Nicias and Demosthenes, captured and executed, paid the final price for imperial folly. Athens had become more than a city. She was an idea made stone. Her white temples glowed beneath the Attic sun, and her harbor at Piraeus thrummed with ships bound for every shore of the Aegean. Within her walls, democracy reached its highest flower. Citizens gathered upon the Pnyx Hill, their voices rising like the hum of bees, debating law, philosophy, and the very meaning of freedom itself. Pericles believed Athens was the school of Hellas, a beacon to all mankind. Art, drama, and inquiry flourished. Sophocles staged his tragedies. Phidias carved gods from marble, and in quiet courtyards, Socrates asked his endless, unsettling questions. The world looked to Athens and saw beauty, intelligence, and the conviction that humans could shape their destiny through reason. But across the Peloponnesus, another kind of greatness endured. Sparta, austere, disciplined, silent. No marble, no philosophers, no art but that of war. Her sons were trained from birth to obey, endure, and fight. Their city was not built of stone, but of will. Where Athens saw freedom in speech, Sparta found virtue in silence. To Athenian ears, they were crude. To Spartan eyes, Athenians were soft. The two were bound to clash, as fire and water cannot share the same vessel. As Athens expanded her empire, demanding tribute and obedience, the Spartans watched uneasily. The Delian League's treasury, once housed upon Delos, was quietly moved to Athens itself. Gold meant for defense gilded statues and temples. To many Greeks, it seemed Athens now ruled them, not protected them. And in the smoky halls of Sparta, the ephors whispered of Athenian arrogance, Then came the spark. Corinth, proud and wealthy, found itself at odds with a smaller ally, Corcyra. Athens intervened, siding with Corcyra against Corinth, a Spartan ally. The web of treaties tightened, and what began as a quarrel among colonies soon grew into a tangle of obligations and pride. Thucydides would later write that what truly drove the war was fear, Sparta's fear of Athens's rising power. In 431 BCE, the storm broke. The Peloponnesian War had begun. From the north, Spartan armies marched into Attica, burning fields and farms. Athenian citizens crowded behind their long walls, safe but suffocating. Pericles counseled patience. Let them ravage the land. We have the sea, and so Athens turned outward, her triremes ruling the waves, raiding the coasts of the Peloponnese, striking where the Spartans could not follow. When the smoke of war at last lifted from the Greek world, what remained was silence. The proud city-states that had once stood as beacons of freedom and courage were left weakened, haunted by memories of glory and ruin alike. The temples still shone white against the blue sky, but beneath their columns, voices had grown quieter. The age of heroes was over. Athens, though broken, did not vanish. Her ships were gone, her empire dissolved, yet her mind, her restless, questioning spirit, lived on. The men who survived the war turned inward, seeking meaning in philosophy. In the shaded groves of the Academy, Plato dreamed of perfect forms. In the Lyceum, Aristotle studied nature and reason. The sons of a fallen democracy built foundations for thought that would outlast empires. Sparta, for her part, stood at the height of power, yet she too was changed. Victory had made her cautious, suspicious, and inflexible. She ruled by fear, not by faith. Within a generation, her discipline began to rot from within. The sons of warriors forgot the hunger of their fathers. When Thebes rose and shattered her army at Leuctra, the Spartan myth began to crumble. The iron of her soul, once unbreakable, was dulled by time. And beyond the Peloponnesus, the world moved on. Macedon, a rough northern kingdom long dismissed by the Greeks, learned from their triumphs and their failures. King Philip forged unity where Athens and Sparta had only known rivalry. His son, Alexander, would carry that legacy farther than any before him, spreading Greek thought and culture from Egypt to India. The dream of Hellas was reborn, not in the polis, but in the hearts of distant cities that spoke her tongue. Thus, the Peloponnesian War ended not only an age, but an idea that freedom and unity could coexist in equal measure. It was the struggle of two visions, the freedom of the mind and the discipline of the body. Athens and Sparta had each believed theirs was the path to greatness. In truth, both were right and both were wrong. Today, their shadows still stretch across the modern world. The Parthenon still crowns its hill, scarred but eternal. The ruins of Sparta lie quiet, visited by wind and memory. Yet in every courtroom, in every debate, in every heart that weighs duty against freedom, the echo of their conflict remains. For what is civilization, if not the eternal balance between Athens and Sparta, between the dreamer and the soldier, the thinker and the doer, the voice and the silence? And perhaps, in that balance, the story of humanity itself endures.